All right, so we're talking about rotations. So for rotations are a little tricky when it comes to the algebra part. Now we kind of already talked about rotations a little bit before, so I'm going to start with an example. Let's say you have a point on a plane. Let's do something easy. How about, let's put our point at 2, 1. All right, so we'll call it point A, and it's going to be at 2, 1. All right, so point A is at 2, 1. Now suppose I want to rotate this. I could rotate it clockwise, or I can rotate it counterclockwise. Let's go ahead and try counterclockwise first. So if I'm going to rotate a point, that means that I have a 90-degree angle here, and I'm trying to move it like this. I'm rotating 90 degrees. So think of this, this goes over 2 and up 1. Now instead of going over 2, I need to go up 2 because I want a 90-degree angle. So instead of going over 2, I'm going up 2. And instead of going up 1, I'm going to go over 1. This is going to be my new point. This is A that has been rotated by 90 degrees counterclockwise. So this is a rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise. So again, if I go over 2, that means I have to go up 2. If I go up 1, well, if I rotate this 90 degrees, now I'm going over 1. So just remember that. 90 degrees, just like that. And this works for any point you have. You can have an entire shape. As long as you go point by point, you can just use that principle. So let's look at the coordinate that I have here. So this new coordinate, my x is going to be -1. My y now became +2. So let's look at how they change. Let's look at the x's and y's and what actually happened. So I'm going to make a list. We're going to have rotations. And I'm going to start with 90 degrees counterclockwise. So 90 degrees counterclockwise. We started with x, y. And we had this notation before. Remember we had it when it came to translations, reflections. We had this algebraic notation. Well, we're going to do the same notation here. We start with x, y. This transforms into, let's look at what we did with x and y. Notice that the x and the y, they switched around. They flipped places. So when I rotated, they flipped. So now y actually goes first, x goes second. And notice one more thing too. That y, which was formerly +1, became a -1. So the y is going to become a negative. So that is a negative y, x. Now, I can get to this point by going 90 degrees counterclockwise, but notice I can also rotate 90 clockwise, 180 clockwise, and then finally 270 clockwise. Each time I move in a different quadrant, I go 90 degrees. So if I go about this point the opposite direction, that's actually 270 degrees clockwise. 270 degrees clockwise. So these two are actually the same thing. 270 clockwise, 90 degrees counterclockwise are the same thing. I'm just going about it in a different direction, but it's still the same thing. So we have 270 degrees, we have 90 degrees counterclockwise. 180 degrees is really easy. 180 degrees. It doesn't matter if it's clockwise or counterclockwise because, notice, I go to the fourth quadrant, to the third quadrant. All right, if I go the other direction, counterclockwise, I go to the second quadrant, the third quadrant. I still end up in the same spot. So it doesn't matter which direction you go. Now let's look at what the coordinates actually do. So let's go 90 degrees at a time. So 90 degrees counterclockwise, let's do another 90 degrees. So I go up 2 over 1. So instead of going up 2, I'm going to go over 2. Instead of going over 1, I'm going to go down 1. So that's going to be my new point right here. Notice the coordinates for this new point. Those coordinates are -2, -1. Look at what happened. I didn't flip the x and the y. All I did was change the sign. That's all I did. So what we have here is xy becomes negative x, negative y. That's all I have. All right, super easy. And then finally, let's do 270 degrees counterclockwise. Let's see what we get with that. What does that become? So 270 degrees counterclockwise. So let's see, counterclockwise, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. Let's go a little further, take it to 270 degrees. So my point's going to be out here. So let's look at where it is exactly. Over 2, down 2. All right? So let's see, let me change that to 90 degrees. Change it like that. So instead of going over 2, I'm going to go down 2. Instead of going down 1, I'm going to go over 1. So that's down 2 over 1. So now my new A, my point A, is going to be, well, let's see, I'm at 1, comma, negative 2. So notice what happened. This time at 270, I flipped x and y. So I can say xy. So we flip the y and the x. And let's see here, what became negative? The last one became negative, so I have a negative x. So 270 degrees, also same thing as 90 degrees clockwise. So I can either do 270 counterclockwise, or I could do 90 degrees clockwise. So that's 90 degrees clockwise. All right, so these are our 3 basic rules right here. We got these 2, and I got this one over here. Kind of ran out of some room. But those are the 3 big rules right here. These 3 right here. Those are what you really need to remember. And if you don't remember them, just make a Cartesian plane, place a random point, and just rotate it around. See what happens to those coordinates, and you can actually rebuild these for yourselves.
What about 360 degrees?
And 360 degrees, good question. 360 degrees just takes you all the way back to where you started. Just think about it. 90, 180, 270, 360 is back where you started.